If you've been watching my videos and reading some of the comments that I've been putting on them, you'll probably know that I'm a bit of a fan of Battle of Gods the movie. Not only do I really like this film, I consider it to be the best piece of Dragon Ball content since the Namek arc, and the best modern piece of content by a wide margin. That's not to say that I don't even like some concepts and bits and pieces of, say, the Android arc, or GT, or that all of it was executed poorly. It's just that after the Namek arc, it really feels like Toriyama really lost the ability to make the disparate elements of his storylines create a cohesive and satisfying whole, and this is a problem that has kept plaguing the franchise for a really long time now. And Battle of Gods, kinda, in my opinion, the movie version, stands out as something else. It stands out as a truly good piece of storytelling in the Dragon Ball universe, and that's rarer nowadays than you might think, especially if you're someone like me who likes Dragon Ball for the context behind the fights, why the fights happen, what drives the fights, what are the fights trying to say, over just liking Dragon Ball for fighting's sake. And this is the movie that kind of prompted my interest in Dragon Ball, period, because I was not a guy who grew up with Dragon Ball. I didn't watch much of it as a kid because it really didn't air here. I saw a few episodes of Goku vs. Frieza, and then they stopped airing it. I saw a couple of episodes, or rather a couple of the movies, like movie 13, Wrath of the Dragon in Italian, but only, once again, bits and pieces of it. And so Dragon Ball was just not a thing that I really grew up with. I was kind of more of a guy who grew up during the Big Three era, with Bleach and Naruto primarily being, I guess, the shonen battle series of my childhood. But then in late 2014, there was a big push concerning the theatrical English release of Battle of Gods, which would also follow the extended cut version of Battle of Gods. And so I saw this, I thought it looked really interesting, and I decided to jump in on it. And so, in preparation for the release of Battle of Gods, the extended cut back then in late 2014, I started to binge watch Dragon Ball Kai in its dub form. And so I went through that, thought it was really good, started to, read the manga very slowly, went through the manga, and I've also, seen bits and pieces of the original Z anime in various, languages, the original Dragon Ball anime as well. So, for better or for worse, mostly worse, Battle of Gods the movie got me into this franchise. And so, I'm not going to say I'm not biased towards this movie, but I'm just being honest with you guys. There is obviously a bias there, so you probably should take that into consideration. And that's not even to say that I think this movie is an absolute tour de force masterpiece, because it absolutely has problems, some on a narrative level and some on a visual level, but overall they're more like a couple of warts on a beautiful face, whereas the rest of the stuff that follows Battle of Gods is like a pair of pretty eyes on a face that would be beautiful if it wasn't beaten to almost to near death with a baseball bat, which is how I describe the rest of the content after Battle of Gods. So, this film has been something that was kind of inevitable, because in the mid-2000s, Shueisha and Toei asked Toriyama if he wants to do some new Dragon Ball content, and he said no, because he was still severely burned out from doing it, and one of the primary things that did burn out Toriyama back then was the prolonged Majin Buu battle. In fact, he flat out says that the fight against Majin Buu went on for such a long time, it basically killed his interest in doing a long-running shonen battle manga ever again. And so he said no. Shueisha and Toei decided to make Dragon Ball Kai. Dragon Ball Kai didn't really work out because the original Dragon Ball anime was still in syndication. It was consistently there on reruns, and so unlike, say, over in the West, where Kai was seen as an opportunity for the dub cast to do new and interesting things and a more faithful adaptation, there was really no point to Kai ultimately in Japan, and one of the reasons why Kai took so long to get through the Buu arc was specifically because it was basically a flop over there. But in the early 2010s, Toei decided to move on without Toriyama and to do a film that was the original concept for Battle of Gods. This was originally labeled as a movie in between Z and GT, and it would have been about the wedding between Krillin and Android 18. Beerus was like this lizard creature who infected people with evil, and he was the original reason why the Saiyan race was as vicious as they were. And the movie was originally much darker with its subject matter, and it was also going to question whether or not Goku is actually a hero or not. And of course, some of these concepts were changed. Obviously, the festivity in the finalized version is Bulma's wrong wedding. Not wrong wedding, wrong birthday, sorry, because she says she's 39, but she's actually like, I think she's like 43 or 44. Whatever it is, the birthday that they give in the movie, the final version, is just flat out wrong. Beerus is, of course, completely revamped by Toriyama, who jumped onto the project later on. The Super Saiyan God was originally going to be like a form in between 3 and 4. It was going to give Goku a cape, but then Toriyama jumped in and then he made it identical to Goku's base form with some noticeable differences, and the rest is history. And honestly, I kind of feel like this is what Dragon Ball should do. Get someone else to write the story, then have Toriyama jump in, be almost like a script doctor, and give his touch here and there to maybe, rough out some of the edges, and that's what we should be doing, because Toriyama is, even in his prime, Toriyama was not a planner. He was a guy who would make up crazy shit, and then he would, for a time anyway, find really convincing ways to connect the dots. So I continue to be really perplexed by the fact that they let a guy who's clearly not good at planning, even when he was at the top of his game, in a planning position. Honestly, they should just do what they did with Battle of Gods as a movie, and that's make someone else the head writer and just have Toriyama be a glorified script doctor for it. I think that would probably solve a lot of narrative problems with Dragon Ball content post Battle of Gods. But with all this shit out of the way, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Why do I like Battle of Gods so much? Well, I think it's possibly one of the few stories that actually does something interesting with Goku and Vegeta on a character level. Goku in particular is very interesting here because he kind of acts more like Vegeta in this. The context for the film is that after defeating Frieza, kind of Cell, and kind of Majin Buu, Goku has become cocky. He's become very sure of himself. He's kind of gotten a bit more character traits like Vegeta, and his arc in the movie is very similar to what Popo taught him back after he defeated Daimao, because that was another instance where Goku had gotten cocky, thinking he could beat anybody, and then Popo reminded him of Roshi's important lesson of, there is always people out there who are stronger than you, so don't act like an arrogant son of a bitch. And that's what Goku has forgotten. He's had successes mount over the years, and so he's gotten a bit of a big head. And there are multiple instances that prove this point directly. When he first transforms into Super Saiyan 3, he cockily asks Beerus if 3 looks like it's too much for him, and if he should dial down back to 2. And then when Beerus basically just shrugs at him, Goku gets actually kind of pissed off that this guy's underestimating him, and he's actually kind of like wounding his pride, and so he goes at Beerus, and it doesn't end well for him. More evidence mounts later on in the film when they discuss who is righteous enough to be considered a good candidate for the creation of Super Saiyan God, and both Piccolo and Roshi also state that they don't think Goku is worthy anymore because they think that Goku has gotten too involved in his own battle junkiness, and they don't think he's righteous enough to qualify for the ritual, and that Goten and Gohan are the only ones who can do it anymore. Obviously they're wrong, but it's actually really interesting to point out that both Piccolo and Roshi just don't have that kind of faith in Goku anymore. And then the next biggest piece of evidence is that Goku is annoyed that he needed other people's help to stand up to Beerus. Now, Goku is the guy who doesn't beat anybody besides Nappa by himself. He needed the help of Yajirobe, Krillin, and Gohan to beat Vegeta. If they didn't show up to help him, Vegeta would have just flat out killed him, and that would have been the end of the series. The reason why he lasts as long as he does against Frieza is because Piccolo, Gohan, and Krillin hold him off. The only reason they win against Cell is because Gohan is around. The only reason he beats Majin Buu is because Mr. Satan gets the energy from the people of the Earth, and then, Fat Buu shows up to help him, Vegeta shows up to help him. Goku is a guy who, more often than not, throughout his later life, wins his battles expressly because of other people's help. And in this movie, he's annoyed that he needs other people's help to win, and he keeps trying to beat Beerus. He wants to prove to himself and kind of everybody else that he's the top dog still. And then when Goku concedes defeat, he basically realizes that he was being an arrogant douchebag, that no matter how much he wants it, Beerus is definitively stronger than him at this point in time, and that Goku was wrong to disrespect him the way he did beforehand. And it's a really cool arc. It really does examine Goku in an interesting way. Yes, it is kind of a retread of the Popo thing, but honestly the Popo thing wasn't that big of a deal even in the manga as it is here, and so I can let it slide that even this is kind of a bit of a retread. So that's why I really like Goku in this movie. I think that they really intelligently kind of look at his character, figure out that Goku is kind of a creature of habits, and putting him in this kind of situation where he's gotten a big head and needs to cool off, and he's the one who has to learn some respect and humility towards his enemy, is a really cool bit of twisting around what could have been a very generic storyline. Vegeta is probably even better in this regard because Vegeta's the guy who doesn't want to fight. When Vegeta hears that Beerus is coming, he wants to not fight. He wants to placate Beerus, do whatever it takes to get him from staying mad, or getting mad, and leaving the Earth in peace. Vegeta, the arrogant bastard, genocidal maniac from the past, wants to not fight someone who is touted as the strongest guy in the universe because he's afraid of what will happen to the Earth. This is such a cool twist on Vegeta, and I absolutely love it. Unlike what's done later on in Super, where we just do him raging out when Future Trunks gets killed over and over and over again, this is basically getting the same point across as all of that shit, except in a really cool way, because this isn't Vegeta getting a massive power increase from someone he loves getting hurt. This is Vegeta acting like a clown to save the world. This is him making himself look like an absolute fucking idiot in front of all of these people he knows, and knowing that they'll remember him acting like this just for the sake of saving the world. Vegeta, of all people, does this. It is a million times more interesting, more satisfying, and just plain works better to sell that message over just having him get angry and try to punch Beerus out, which is one of the reasons why I don't like the My Bulma scene, because we already did the whole part of Vegeta actually loves the Earth and he loves these people and he wants to keep them safe through him acting like a moron and casting aside his pride to save them. So having the generic thing happen where Vegeta's going to prove he loves everyone by fighting, it's not necessary. I know what Toriyama was trying to do with that, but I just don't feel like it's necessary. And it feels like they just kind of did that so Vegeta has like a cool fighting moment in the movie. But honestly, I find him doing the bingo dance and in general acting like a total moron in front of Beerus to save the Earth much, much more compelling and much more interesting. Another thing that really works in this movie, kind of with the perspective of time, is Super Saiyan God, because this is probably one of the only transformations in the modern run that has any fucking thought put into it whatsoever. It has an actual lore. It has an actual developed backstory. It actually makes sense in the context of the movie, because the Saiyans were this evil, vicious species, and so to become the most powerful version of a Saiyan God, you have to become a righteous person, collect a group of righteous people, and then pour their energy into yourself. It's really a damn good twist on the expected thing. It's not just someone gets really angry and then powers up. In fact, it's kind of one of the reasons why I also like Super Saiyan 4, because it's not about powering up, it's not about being angry, but it's actually kind of being the opposite of angry and the opposite of a rageful, destructive Saiyan, which lets you ascend to a greater level of power. And I also think that God is one of the more effective designs. It has that good Toriyama quality of simplicity, where the design is simple, but it also has enough stark differences that make it stick out in good ways. Goku looks younger, he looks thinner, even his hair is different, his eyes are different, the aura looks different. I don't feel like this is just him not giving a shit, the way I kind of get that impression with, say, Golden Frieza, or Super Saiyan Blue, or especially completed Ultra Instinct. It really does feel like a group of people sat down and they actually thought out a design for once, which is much, much rarer in Dragon Ball than what you might think. I think that God and 4 might be the only transformations that have anything approaching actual thought put into them, which is kind of crazy to talk about. Beerus and Whis are great. Beerus, I like him here because he's not overly antagonistic. In fact, there's a really funny moment when Mai is threatening to kill Trunks with a gun, and everyone's just being kind of ambivalent about it. And then Beerus gets mad because a child is being threatened and nobody cares. And so Beerus is kind of like the more moral guy there. But make no mistake, he is an antagonist, and his reasons for wanting to destroy the Earth are petty, but I do like the fact that he's not just a cackling evil bastard, and nor is he a stupid rage machine like Broly. He does really come off as like a bad guy. He really does come off as a dude who just kind of usually destroys things because it's his job to do it. And this version of Beerus actually feels like he has a bit of professionalism about it. Whereas later on, they kind of characterize him as this really kind of deplorable douchebag, which would work if they followed up on a subplot there, but I'm not going to get into a super rant. Obviously, I dig Beerus. I think he has a good presence. I like the way he's portrayed in this movie. He has, the right kind of combination of being kind of a petulant child, but also this dude with actual experience and some actual gravitas to him, and I think he ultimately works. His role is kind of awkward because both him and Majin Buu are supposed to be these incredibly powerful beings who periodically show up and cause massive destruction after ages of hibernation, and so this is kind of one of those things where the Beerus and Majin Buu kind of awkwardly exist for the same purpose. In the lore sense, their purpose is exactly the same, so that's just kind of awkward and weird, honestly, but it's, like I said, it's a small wart that doesn't diminish the rest of the movie, and the rest of the film does actually have more good moments, like Oolong versus Beerus on Rock, Paper, Scissors is hilarious, and Yamcha fucking it up is also pretty funny. The bingo dance is hilarious. Gohan realizing he's going to be a dad is a really, really touching scene. The score for this movie is absolutely amazing, using these really orchestral pieces to sell you on the gravity of the situation. And I still say that this might just be the best work Sumitomo's ever done for Dragon Ball. That's not to say I dislike his super score. I actually like him a lot more than most people do, mostly because I'm not a raging Kikuchi fanboy who thinks that Kikuchi's soundtrack is the only good Dragon Ball soundtrack that's ever been done. I think that's absolutely stupid, but he does have some issues later on, especially during his Kai score, which is just not very good most of the time. But this is really the best work he's ever done for the franchise, if you ask me. Now, a lot of my other problems with the film, and this is kind of like an actually big one, it's kind of the look of the movie. I don't know what happened here, if they're using some kind of filter on the screen, but the whole movie looks kind of really bright and really kind of off. It's hard to describe it. The whole movie feels like it has this bizarre misty effect from beginning to end, and that's kind of making everything look unnecessarily blurry and unnecessarily bright. And also, I just don't like Yamamuro. I like Yamamuro's 90s stuff, but I've never liked his designs. They all look big, bulky, and plasticky. I don't like the fact that a lot of the movie just kind of looks flat, because he's just not very good at framing shots and that kind of stuff. I don't like the fact that potentially great animation is dumbed down because of his big corrections. And overall, the look of this movie is just not great. If they could have gotten someone else to do the character designs, or at the very least someone better to storyboard the thing, I think the movie would have worked so much better. But yeah, like visually speaking, I can't really defend the film because it doesn't look particularly good. There are like good moments in it, like when Goku, explodes underground and then comes rushing into the air and then he fights Beerus across the sky. I think that's really good. That was done by Shida. Him blowing away Beerus' death ball is really good. Them fighting across the planet looked decent. But overall, there's just something about the style of this movie that makes it stick out, and not in a good way. And I don't know what the hell they did with it, because Resurrection F didn't look this kind of misty and overly bright when it came out 2 years later, so I really don't know what the fuck they were doing with this thing while they were making it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Battle of Gods and why I like it. I think this is a rare modern Dragon Ball story that has actual thought put into it. I think it has something interesting to say and do with its characters, and ultimately I think it is an absolute success, and it's a damn shame we couldn't have stayed on this level of quality for all the stuff that followed it.